Okay, so let's dive in and let's talk about operationalizing your value proposition. And so let's begin by talking about why demonstrate value to your customers. Why do this at all? And it can feel at first like this is a bit of a humble brag or a bit of a Ron Burgundy kind of move. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a big deal. And but when you're really demonstrating your value to your customers, absolutely, it has benefits for you. Absolutely, you are helping your customers understand your value and deepen their relationship with you. But fundamentally, it's not about you. You're demonstrating your value in a way that is going to be relevant, actionable, helpful to your customers. And that's really the key when thinking about demonstrating value is absolutely humble brag. Don't wear the Ron Burgundy jacket though, I can't recommend that. And but do it in a way that moves your customer forward. And the reason why this is important is because in customer success, our job is to be changing our customers' behavior. I know that doesn't always seem intuitive, but our customers are hiring us to produce a new level of result towards some outcome that's really important for their business. And for them to get that level of results, obviously they're not getting it the way they're behaving today. So not only do they need our software and our services, but they need to change their behaviors in a way that is going to give them the results they want. And in general, if they don't change their behavior, they're not going to get the results they're looking for. And so how this works, why you want to demonstrate value to your customer and how that helps them change their behavior in the right way is these two virtuous circles here. The first one is the more that a customer feels confident about their choice of product, their commitment to improve their performance in this area of their business or of their life or of their practice, the more confident they are to set bigger goals, the more confident they are to try new ideas, the more confident they are to let go of old practices and implement new practices. So, and the more confidence they get, the more confident they are. And so the first reason for demonstrating value to your customers is to get this confidence loop really going in a virtuous way. And that's really critical to building their confidence and getting them to change their behavior. And then the next loop is the more that they change their behavior, the more success that they're getting. And by demonstrating the value they're getting from your product in terms that demonstrate that they're being successful, that increases their confidence too. So it can be a longer loop than the confidence route, but increasing your customers' confidence and competence so that they can generate new levels of success are really the drivers for demonstrating the value that they're getting from your platform. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple of well-known examples of companies that are very effective at demonstrating value to their customers. The first is Nest. Nest is well known for their weekly and monthly emails that they send to their customers that demonstrate the value that they're getting from Nest in terms of energy saved, cost saved. But this example is an email that shows them that that you're using more energy in July than in June. And then the next email, the next part of the email, I split this up, are the reasons why the energy consumption went up. And so this is really critical. Just a status that, you know, you're using more energy this week, this month than last month, doesn't necessarily demonstrate value or provide anything more than just a simple status. But by showing them what they can do to impact their energy consumption, then you're reinforcing your value proposition with them. And another example is HubSpot. HubSpot does a really good job of informing their customers both on a weekly and a monthly basis of the progress they're making. And obviously, if you're a HubSpot customer, you're interested in web visits, you're interested in leads, and the weekly email that tells you how well you're doing this week versus last week is awesome. But also in that email, they go into your various marketing tactics, and so you can see not just the outcome that you wanted to see from HubSpot, but the tactics you're using to generate that outcome and how you're performing along the dimension of each tactic. And so they're both demonstrating value and giving you the opportunity to improve by showing you how you're performing in each tactic. Okay, so those are a couple of examples, and I'll go into more what's going on in those examples, what makes them work a bit later. Sending emails is only one way of demonstrating value. It's an easy way to include in a PowerPoint deck or a webinar, but at the end I'll be talking about other ways that you can demonstrate value. But the first step before you can demonstrate value is you have to operationalize your value proposition. And so let me tell you what that means and why it's so important. So to begin with, you have to have a value proposition. And loyalty with a customer begins with them understanding the value that they're going to get from the business relationship they're having with you. And so defining, delivering, and communicating clear value really positions them to understand where you fit in their life and in their business. And that is the foundation of building customer loyalty in the relationship. But the value proposition that a CEO might present to an investor, or that a marketing person might use in their communication and advertising strategy, and even that a salesperson might use in closing a deal and working with prospects, is going to be a little different than the value proposition that we have to work with as customer success people. And so the concept of operationalizing your value proposition, this is really where the rubber hits the road. And what that means is the steps taken to measure the value proposition in terms of its observable characteristics. And so this is what's happening in reality that is valuable for the customer. And your brand promise or your salesperson's promise may not always be that specific, but your customers will think about it that specifically. Okay, so to show you what I mean by that is I broke down Amity's value proposition into operational components just to take you through an example. So at a high level, our brand value proposition is that we help our customers become proactive and scalable in their customer success processes. That's been our value proposition and our brand promise for several years now, and likely it's going to stay that way for another few years. But that value proposition alone is really tough to operationalize. What does proactive mean? What does scalable mean? What does customer success mean? And so, you can break that down to another level, more operational. So it can mean lower revenue churn, higher conversion rates on your trials, increased upsell revenue, lower the overall cost of retention in your operation. And those are starting to become measurable. Those are starting to become operational. But they don't really tell you what you're doing that's working and not working. And so you can dive down another level. And, just a few examples is, you can show customers progress towards their goals. You can show customers where they stand in a peer group benchmark. You can show changes in trend, for example, activity level or engagement level. You can show revenue per CSM, and something like on-time implementation rate can predict churn and talk about the cost of retention. And so those are starting to become operationalized metrics. And then below that, what are the specific actions that customers are taking that are impacting those operational metrics? And that's what I mean by operationalizing your value proposition. How does your company, your platform, your services, your CSMs, how does all of that combine to deliver your company's value proposition? Because to manage it, you have to break it down in this kind of detail. Okay, so when talking about value propositions, at Amity, we like to think about it in terms of outcomes. And, it's our favorite slide is the lemonade stand, because it reminds us that we're not in a product business. None of us are in a product business. We're in a relationship business. And the particular type of relationship that we have with our customers is that they're hiring us to produce a certain level of outcome in their life or in their business. And by outcome, we mean specifically, what's the job to be done? What are they hiring you to accomplish? And so an outcome is something defined that happens as a result of an activity or a process. So an outcome is the result of them working with you, and they're concrete, specific, and measurable. And a few examples of outcomes are reduced churn, higher revenue, more leads, lower costs, more closed deals, increased donations, faster response times, improved database performance. These are all measurable outcomes that a customer would be interested in hiring someone to accomplish. So understanding your value proposition begins with really understanding the outcomes that you're producing. Okay, so now that you know what the outcomes that you're producing, these are how you're going to report your value to your customers. You have to understand, how do you produce those outcomes? What is it that you are doing that are helping your customers generate that outcome? And a few examples of things that you might want to track and manage are customer capabilities. If they're producing a new level of result, it's very likely that they're going to need new capabilities in their processes or in their organization. Certainly action, no result. So what actions are your customers going to need to take to produce the new level of outcome? And outputs. Outputs are not outcomes, but they are work product that contribute to producing a result. For Amity, using a product like HubSpot, the outputs are the number of landing pages we put up, the number of blog posts, the number of emails we send. Those are all outputs, and they all contribute to us producing the outcome that we want. And understanding the relationship between those outputs and those outcomes is really important to us as a business. Okay, so once you identified the drivers for each outcome that your customers produce, then you can start thinking about what KPIs you're going to use to track that driver. And there's really 5 types of KPIs. Inputs, so you might track the resources that they're using, the time they're using, the money they're using, the materials they're using. That's an input to producing the outcome. Activity levels, what tasks are they performing, what work are they doing. Output, so what are the work products, what are the artifacts that they might produce, what outcomes, what's the job to be done. We talked a lot about that. And then bigger picture, what's the impact of getting that job done? Does it make the company more competitive? Does it improve the lifetime value of a customer? So what's the overall impact on the business, on their customers of achieving that outcome? So those are types of KPIs that you can build for your drivers. Wish there was I could see if there was any questions, but I'll move on. Okay, so now to demonstrate value, you have to operationalize your value proposition, and that means understanding the outcomes that you produce for that customer, that you promise to that customer, the drivers that produce that outcome, and the KPIs you're going to have to measure whether that outcome is being produced or not. So once you've operationalized your value proposition, the next step towards demonstrating your value to customers is to define actionable insights. And actionable insights are what gets customers excited, is how they see value, it's their insights to them and they're actionable to them. And so what's an insight? So at one level, an insight is an opportunity for action or an opportunity for improvement. I found this long definition of insight that had some interesting components to it. So an insight is a thought, fact, combination of facts, data, or analysis that gives the customer meaning and furthers their understanding of a situation or issue. So one job that an insight has to accomplish is to further their understanding of their business, of their task, of their processes. And that understanding has the potential of benefiting the business. So we all want to show our customers our own vanity metrics, but our vanity metrics demonstrate value maybe to our executives or to our investors, but they don't demonstrate value to our customers. It's this, giving them an insight that helps them understand their business, understand their problem better in a way that can benefit their business or have them rethink their business. That's really the job of an insight. Okay, what an insight isn't. So an insight isn't information. So an insight isn't a report or a dashboard. I think most people that have an executive dashboard or a team dashboard that looks something like the one on the left here will really understand that there's status information there, but there's not a lot of insight information there. And it's also not just status. The project is working on the 3rd phase and we're halfway through that. And just that information doesn't provide any level of insight at all and doesn't help your customers improve their confidence and competence. So you're looking for an insight that will drive action. And the test for an insight is this an opportunity for the customer to take action? So when we look at our HubSpot report and we see that our landing page click-through rate is 10% lower this week over last week, we immediately know where to turn our attention to. And so the way you demonstrate your value to your customers should have that flavor of not only telling them where they're at, but pointing them in the direction of making improvements towards getting the new level of outcomes that they're looking for. Okay. So the sources of insight. This is both art, science, and design. This could fill a whole webinar on its own, but the insights are going to come from those types, the types of KPIs we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago: inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, impacts. And then you're going to want to use that information to show, are we on track or are we off track? Are we breaking trend? Are we breaking trend up? Are we breaking trend down? How are we doing as a benchmark against our relevant peer group? Are we in the top 20%, the bottom 20%, and are we moving up or down against our peer groups? Causal relationships. So if you remember the email that I showed at the beginning from Nest, it showed, here's how your power consumption has changed from one month to the next, and then here's why. And that here's why really creates opportunities for improvement, opportunities for action. It can be very valuable to take a large amount of data and show patterns that they wouldn't otherwise see. You can use data to demonstrate context or perspective. And for example, if there's seasonality in their business, the fact that the power usage went up in Toronto between July and June really just tells you that July is hotter in Toronto than it is in June, and we're using more air conditioning. And then one causal relationship that comes to the top is, what's the ROI of their relationship with you? So they're producing a certain level of outcome or a certain level of impact. How much is that costing them, and what is what's the benefit of that? So these insights, these actionable insights that come directly from your value proposition, now this becomes the material that you can use to demonstrate your value to your customers. Okay, so what are the strategies that we can use to demonstrate value to our customers? So we have a process of operationalizing our value proposition and turning it into insights that are actionable and meaningful for our customers. But how do we actually demonstrate our value? What strategies are there? And there's a lot. There's a few that I want to talk about today. Some of them are non-obvious. So demonstrating value, again, it's an opportunity for improvement. And the process of demonstrating value to your customers is you're telling them a story. And that story invites them to take the actions they need to achieve their desired outcomes. And that's really the heart of demonstrating value to your customers, and why we do that is you want to give them a story. You don't want to give them a bunch of data points. If I read a response, if I read an email from one of our vendors that has more than 8 pieces of data on it, it's very likely I'm not going to remember it. It's not going to cause me to change any of our behavior. What I'm looking for is a story that tells me how I'm doing and what I need to do next. So at one level, it's you need to turn those insights, design those insights so that they tell a story. And then once you have that story, there's a few different ways that you can tell that story to your customers. So one important way, especially if you're in a high-touch business, is coaching. You have data that you want to provide your customers, and you can provide those insights. You don't have to necessarily give them an email. You don't necessarily have to give them a report. You can just, in a coaching call with an executive or with a team or with one of the practitioners, you can tell them the insights that you've learned by watching their performance using your service, and deliver those insights in person, and then using those insights, coach them to implement the right actions to move to the next level of performance. And so you can coach in person, and obviously very effective to do this in person. And the output of this kind of conversation with a customer is usually a success plan where you lay out their goals in terms of the outcomes they want to produce, and the actions that they're going to take to move towards those outcomes. If you're in a low-touch business and you can't have a one-on-one conversation with all of your customers, you can do this with targeted training materials. So if you're noticing that a customer is off track on one of the KPIs that you've identified, that KPI will be necessarily very actionable, and that result will be very actionable. And so you can send them training emails or point them at your online resources or an online video so that you can change their behavior through training and educational material. So coaching is really a very effective way of both demonstrating value to your customers by coaching them from the actionable insights, and by training them to move forward in the next level of action. Okay. So the second strategy you can use to demonstrate value is in a quarterly business review. It could be a monthly business review, could be a biannual business review or an annual business review. It really depends on how you segment your customers, but quarterly business reviews are really a strategic element of high-touch customer success plans, and the minimal elements that you need to consider in a quarterly business review is a success plan review. So this was the plan that we agreed on from the previous time we did a review. Here's the outcomes that we were looking to produce by this period of time. Here's the actions you were going to take. Here's the actions that we were going to take. How did we do? An operational review, support ticket history, how fast are you answering their tickets? Do you have any implementation or integration project updates to give them? So you have to cover off basic project management information, but where you're really going to demonstrate your value is with the actionable insights and the plan. So going through the outcomes that they want to produce, the KPIs that show them what's trending up, what's trending down, where they're on track, where they're off track, and then turning that into a plan that allows them to move to the next level of outcome. That's really the most important aspect of the quarterly business review, both from the point of view of your customer understanding the value you're providing and your customer walking away with action that they can take to improve their performance. It can seem odd that coming out of a quarterly business review that you can be focused on what your customer has to do to produce results. It usually feels like, you have to justify and be accountable for what you need to do as an organization or as a customer success person. But again, if they're not changing their behavior, they're not going to be moving to the next level of results that they're looking for. And so it really is our job to be coaching them to change their behavior, try new practices, take new actions, implement new strategies, and giving them actionable insights based on the value they're expecting is a really important way of doing that. It really makes the job a lot more simple to do. Okay, another strategy we've talked about a couple of times today is the value update emails that you can send. So, I showed you the HubSpot examples and the Nest examples. I'm sure that you get these emails from other vendors that you use as well. And after today's webinar, go back and take a look at some of those emails and see which ones are actually providing you real insight that are going to help you improve your performance, and which one of them are just giving you information that's nice to know, but isn't really going to impact your performance. I'm sure that the emails you have will cover a wide range of those topics, those results. Okay, so there are a lot of different ways that you can demonstrate value. You can do proactive training based on the insights that you generate. You can do prescriptive education based on where you see they're strong and where they're weak and where they're going next. But the key to being able to do any of this is having your value proposition operationalized, broken down into what kinds of outcomes are your customers expecting to get, how what are the drivers of those outcomes, and how are you going to measure those drivers, and whether your customers are being effective or not in those areas. Okay, so that's a quick overview of demonstrating value for your customers. I feel like each of these slides could be a webinar on its own. So this is just the top level discussion. I'm going to turn it over to you and answer your questions. What questions do you have about demonstrating value to your customer, understanding the outcomes that your customer is expecting to get, operationalizing your value proposition, and then turning that into actionable insights for your customers. So while you think about your questions, a quick message from our sponsor. That's me. And Amity is a platform for customer success automation. And here's our value proposition. I went into it in a lot of detail earlier today. So we help our customers lower churn, drive conversion rates, increase upsell, and lower the cost of retention. So we're really about proactive and scalable customer success. And here you can start to see how we go about doing that by breaking that down into various aspects of managing a customer success relationship and the levers that we provide our customers to do that. Usually when we start working with a customer, their life looks a lot like the Paris subway diagram on the left. They're working with 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 different data sources or services for working with their customers. And so Amity pulls all of that data together, and our Intelligent Agent technology lets you collect that data, lets you understand that data, and lets you act on that data, and lets you go through the process that we just went through so that you can demonstrate your value to your customer. And so the Amity technology listens to all of these different aspects of your customer relationships. We turn it into insights that you can help understand what's going on with your customers. And then we have a rules engine, engagement and automation for letting you operationalize all of that understanding and make your customers successful. So that's a little bit about our sponsor, and we'll come back to the webinar now, and we'll try to answer all of your questions. Okay, first question is, do you define the job to be done, or does the customer? And what do you do if the customer doesn't have a clear job to be done at the outset? Yeah, so it's defining the job to be done. That's really a negotiation between the vendor and their customer. And if your customer doesn't have a clear job to be done at the beginning, you know, the first area to coach them is to really be clear why they want to use your product and why they want to have a relationship with your business. And if they don't have a clear job to be done, that would be a yellow flag on the relationship. So, you know, I don't invest heavily in a relationship or a service that isn't going to move my agenda forward, and all of our customers are like that, and I'm sure all of your customers are like that. So the first thing to do is to get that clarity about what the job is to be done with your customer. Okay, next question. Is there any real value to define a value prop in collaboration with the customer? Have them define a value prop in using your product? Yeah, that's, you know, if you're in a situation where you can do that, if you have a high-touch relationship with your customer, first it's really likely that your sales organization promised them a value proposition. So, you know, it would be good to know what they were promised and how they understand that promise. But it would be very useful to go through an exercise of really understanding what their goals are, what the value proposition is. And this is absolutely something all of our customer success managers do during the kickoff process of the relationship, and so that everyone's on the same page. Okay. Yeah, so what about coaching through online trainings using apps such as GoToMeetings? Yeah, that's exactly what I meant by prescriptive training is, you know, by changing up the training regime that you're using for the customer and telling them why you're focusing them in a particular direction. That goes a long way to both demonstrating the value that you're providing, because you know, you're sharing your insight with them, and also focuses them in a way that's going to move them forward towards their own goals. Yeah, how do you identify the customer's KPIs for a low-touch customer in a one-to-many capacity? Yeah, for that, for most low-touch businesses, you're going to do that by segmenting your customers, and then each segment of your customer base is going to have a value proposition that you deliver to that segment, and it's not going to be individualized. You're not going to have time to coach them on their value proposition. But if you've done the segmentation and it's a meaningful segmentation, then each segmentation will have a different value proposition, and then you can use that to operationalize your value proposition. How do you demonstrate value to a hostile customer? Well, you absolutely cannot. If the customer is hostile, to use an example that came to my head, if my wife is mad at me, coming home with flowers isn't going to help. I have to find out why she is mad and listen to her, and until the anger, until the hostility has been resolved, they're not going to care about the value that you're providing, and they're probably not even going to believe you, and it's very likely going to make the situation worse. So you have to drain the swamp of that hostility before you can demonstrate value. Great question. Okay, in terms of value update emails, could they be educational, such as tutorial on different functions in your applications? Yeah, and Amity has a capability for sending these value update emails for our customers to their customers, and in many cases, our customers will include some educational material, a success story, a recommended tutorial, and combine it with the insights. And it's a really effective way of doing it because your customer is seeing they're getting their report card, and it's a report card on you, it's a report card on them, and it's a perfect time for them to be able to hear suggestions on what to do next, or case studies that might give them ideas on what to do next. Okay. What kinds of things can you do to change customer behavior to help them achieve their goals? Well, that's a big question. Most of that will be in the drivers you have for achieving the outcomes. So really understanding how you produce value for your customers is critical for that. But I'll give you a few examples. We're HubSpot customers, but if we don't send email campaigns, and if we don't put up landing pages, and then we're not going to be very effective using HubSpot. And in the very beginning of our relationship with HubSpot, our customer success manager was really insistent on defining our personas so that we were sending emails and designing landing pages for all the different types of people that might come to our website. And we were, really not used to or comfortable with being that formal. And, and they led us through a process to get us to be more formal in how we design our outreach and how we design our landing pages. But it's going to be very specific to your business. Okay, next question. We have a platform over which customers build solutions. So each implementation is very unique, and hence their KPIs are very different from each other. How do you scale customer success, providing value and helping them be successful in such a scenario? Yeah, that's quite similar to the situation at Amity. No two SaaS businesses are the same. No two customer success teams are the same. And so no two Amity implementations are the same. And, there is certainly some overlap, but they can be very different. And so that you need KPIs about the building process, about the solution design and the solution implementation process that show that they're on track and you're on track to getting them the solution that they're looking for. And so that's absolutely essential during the building process. You know, I'd have to learn more about your company and your products to talk more about the ongoing KPIs. All right. How does training fit into this? Well, we've talked a little bit about how training fits into this, but the general idea is to tailor your training program to the insights, you know, to the performance that they're getting. So, you know, if they're strong in one area, you may want to start training them in the next thing and down that path. And if they're weak in one area, you may want to just emphasize that area in your training. And you'll definitely want to take the opportunity to give them some feedback on the results that they're getting and the insights that you've developed about their performance and their progress, and how that is impacting the training you're giving them. Okay, how do you balance good cop, bad cop aspect of CSM? For instance, when a customer breaks their behavior or the account isn't doing well and needs to be escalated, how do you handle communicating to the harder information? Does that harder information get communicated by somebody else? Yeah, well, I think you know, that can vary based on you know, the size of customer, the complexity of the customer relationship, but always the way to deliver bad news to a customer is to take it back to the value proposition and remind them of what was at stake in the relationship, you know, what they were trying to accomplish, what their goals were, and so that they know that that you're coming from a place of wanting to help their business, wanting to help them, and the more that you can bring them back to that value proposition, especially the operationalized value proposition, the more real that is for them, the more freedom that you can have in that conversation. But you know, we've had cases where, for example, a customer was bought out by another company, and customer success became less important. And when we sat down to review their goals with them, you know, they didn't have the same goals anymore because their business was fundamentally different. And you know, there was no point coaching them on how to build a scalable customer success process anymore, because it just wasn't as important as it used to be. So by reviewing the outcomes, by reviewing the value proposition with them, you can surface the fact that their goals have changed, and you know, they're just not that into you anymore. Yeah. Great. Okay, I think we answered everyone's questions. Are there any other questions that anybody has today? Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming out. We're getting done 4 minutes early, a world record for an Amity webinar, and I really appreciate your time and value your feedback on the form that you get after the webinar. And we will be sending the deck and the recording out tomorrow. And if you'd like to talk about how the Amity platform can help you demonstrate value to your customers, just drop us a note, and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you and give you a demonstration of the Amity product. And if you have any questions afterwards, just drop me a line, Paul@GetAmity. And thanks again for coming out, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next webinar. Almost forgot that. Matthew would have been very mad at me. So our next webinar is a joint webinar with the customer success team at Spark Central. We're very excited to be working with Julia and Krista on that. And they're going to be talking about how to measure your success as a CSM. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's Tuesday, July 26th at 1 p.m. So look forward to seeing you then. And thanks again for coming out today.